Madison?
In the last episode, Daniel and Madison were somewhat surprised and delighted to see each other alive. After all, they were among the first to meet when the apocalypse came. Now, there are hardly any old friends left. They decided to cooperate and head to Padre's island together. On the way, Daniel briefly shared what had happened over the years. He said that 7 years ago, because of Morgan, Padre discovered them at sea and took them onto a ship to assess everyone. Based on their skills and usefulness, they were assigned to different places. Everyone was dispersed. Padre thought he was too old and of no use, so they threw him into the swamp. At this point, there was a hint of sadness on Daniel's face, but he quickly continued, saying they were right about him being old. But that doesn't mean he's useless. He was just worried about Charlie, who was very sick at the time. She was like his daughter. He had promised Charlie that he would stay with her until the end, but now he didn't even know where she was. Gradually, he lost his purpose and even didn't know why he was alive. Until he met these parents whose children had been taken by Padre. They were as desperate and angry as he was, so he decided to help them. Under his organization and training, they had essentially become an army, growing stronger and more numerous. He had already lost his family, Charlie, and Luciana. Now, all he could do was help these people find their children, so they have been looking for Padre's island. After listening, Madison advised Daniel not to be pessimistic, because the list of people on the island not only has information about the children, but the whereabouts of Luciana and Charlie are definitely recorded. Daniel was momentarily stunned, as if he saw some hope. Then Dove called them, saying they could use the ship to get to Padre.
Dove, are you sure you want to go down this road?
Maybe you should stop asking questions and begin answering some.
Like what?
Like who else knows you're Padre's daughter?
Not many.
How come your father separates children from their parents, but he doesn't do the same to himself?
Come on, we gotta go.
Diane had been observing Dove, feeling more and more familiar.
I've never seen you before in my life.
Diane was a bit sad, but it could also be that Dove had forgotten about her childhood. Suddenly, voices came from behind them. These teenagers were a squad sent out by Padre. Madison thought about persuading them. After all, they were just a group of brainwashed kids. She even revealed Shrike's identity, but the teenagers couldn't make sense of it, thinking that Padre had created everything, so why should they question it? And the teenagers also threatened them if they didn't let Shrike go. They even threatened to shoot unless Shrike was released. In the end, Daniel decided to confront the youth brigade with them. Madison and Naomi took Shrike aboard as hostages. Thus, the ship set off towards Padre's island. Half an hour later, they arrived at their destination. Madison directly threatened Padre with the walkie-talkie to open the door, or they would kill Shrike. Just as she finished speaking, Daniel's voice came through the walkie-talkie, saying Diane felt Dove was her daughter. A mother's intuition. Diane was visibly excited.
I didn't think it was possible.
But a mother knows.
Don't fall for this crap.
Your name is Alex.
A collector took you from me at a campground outside Baton Rouge years ago.
I think it was that woman, Lark. I'm not sure, but I'm sure about you, Alex.
I've searched so long.
Dove, however, looked troubled. She had no recollection of what Diane was saying. Shrike beside her told Dove not to believe Diane. It's impossible, she's her mother.
Stop lying to her.
I'm not lying.
At this point, all they needed was to get the files to understand everything. In the end, Padre agreed to Madison's demand for the safety of his daughter.
Copy that.
You're about to get all the answers you came here for. Let's go.
But is everything really going to be that smooth? After a while, they were brought into a small room with the files placed on the table. However, Padre still did not show himself, remaining hidden behind a mirror. Before looking through the files, Shrike kept persuading them not to do this. She claimed everything Padre did was for the children, to prevent past events from recurring. But when Naomi and the others asked what happened, Shrike hesitated and refused to reveal it. Angered, Madison directly picked up a sledgehammer and smashed the mirror, wanting to see what Padre truly looked like. The shattered mirror revealed a room, and Madison was visibly shocked by the person inside. Shrike's father was supposed to be an older man, so why was he a young man?
My father can't answer you, 'cause my father is dead.
It turns out that when the apocalypse first erupted, the military hoarded a large amount of supplies, and the person in charge was this officer known as Padre. Padre found this small island for survivors to recuperate, accompanied by his son and daughter. The daughter was Shrike. Back then, they were just children, and Padre was an upright officer who always took helping the people as his duty. Today, he was prepared to take the adults on the island out because a nearby dock had many containers with a vast amount of supplies. Their task was to take these items to help survivors outside established communities, as that was the only hope for humanity.
Senator Vasquez?
We made contact with him yesterday. He and his staff are in a bunker beneath the Franklin Hotel in Galveston. They're safe.
Does the Franklin Hotel they were talking about ring a bell? Alicia learned about the Padre when she was incarcerated there, but the congressman was dead. Soon Padre said goodbye to his children and boarded the ship with the others. 3 hours later, they reached the port where soldiers were preparing to depart. After they all left, two figures emerged from the basement. Shrike's rebellious brother insisted on coming, so she had no choice but to accompany him. They noticed their father's telescope was forgotten. Ben excitedly picked it up to deliver it to their father, but Shrike quickly stopped him. They were already violating rules by coming out, and she worried about what would happen if Ben ran into trouble. But Ben was too disobedient, pushing Shrike aside, using an oar to barricade the door, and then running towards the dock. Their father had mentioned going to the containers for supplies. Ben called out to his father as he ran, imagining being praised by him. Dad! Meanwhile, Shrike finally got free, and when she reached the container, she heard Ben's cries for help along with zombies growling. Shrike rushed in to see two zombies lunging towards Ben. They're both hothouse flowers with no ability to fight, and they're unarmed. What's worse, another two zombies appeared, cornering Ben into a dead end. In such a situation, death seemed inevitable. Shrike could only stand there helplessly. Fortunately, Padre arrived just in time, and before he could even scold him, his son rushed into his arms, having been thoroughly frightened by the recent events. It was clear that all those soldiers had already perished. Without time for discussion and with zombies closing in, they had no bullets left in their guns and had to escape from the other side. But that direction also had zombies. They looked around and found no place to hide. Were they destined to die here today? As the zombies neared, Padre thought of climbing onto the containers. He first sent his daughter up, followed by Ben, but just as the siblings tried to pull up their father, it was too late.
Don't let this die. It's so important.
They could only watch as their father was torn apart by the zombies. Ben was filled with deep regret, thinking if he hadn't been so headstrong, perhaps his father would still be alive. They sat there until evening, unsure of how to face the future, but remembering their father's words. They knew they must be strong, now that all the adults were dead. Revealing the truth to the children would surely cause chaos. So, they returned and claimed their parents had abandoned them, and that they must pull themselves together to survive. Since then, Ben hid behind the mirror, pretending to be their father, while Shrike managed Padre's operations outside. In a blink, over a decade had passed. Newly captured children, as they grew up, were told they were abandoned by their parents and raised by Padre. Everyone was taken aback. However, Madison hadn't forgotten the purpose of her visit. She pulled out the files and first searched for Dove's, wanting to see if Diane was indeed Dove's mother. Madison soon found it, but when she saw Dove's parents' information on it, she felt bad. Dove's mother is actually her, Ava, the woman who died 7 years ago.
She deserves the truth.
Your name is Odessa.
My name? My parents?
Her name was Ava.
What happened to Ava, Lark?
She died.
How?
My mother is dead. Because of you? My mother is dead because of you! Dove, no! You made me believe in something more!
Let go!
Although Madison had taken the children, it was Padre's people who had killed Dove's mother. How could all the blame point towards Madison? Just because of this mistake, how did the situation reverse so suddenly? Madison and Naomi seemed to have forgotten what they came for and were taken down by Padre's men for doing nothing. Shrike handed the microphone to Madison, suggesting if she wanted to tell the truth to the people on the island, she was free to do so. Madison didn't proceed, fearing incidents like Dove's might happen again. And what if the other children's parents were also dead? Despite having the upper hand, Shrike unexpectedly took Madison and Naomi ashore with only 2 guards. Was this walking into a trap? Daniel and his group surrounded them, confiscating their weapons. Diane excitedly looked at Dove. Madison had failed her mission, so Daniel had to take everyone on a ship to Padre personally, leaving behind Shrike and, of course, Dove. The truth had already hurt Dove, yet she chose to stand by Padre. As Daniel and the others headed to the island, Shrike drove to the old dock. After the incident, Shrike and Ben locked up this place, along with the supplies that could help rebuild communities. Thousands of zombies perfectly protected it. Now that Daniel and the other parents were headed to Padre, they would destroy everything there. So Shrike came here again, and she contacted Ben, asking him to come here and meet with her. No one knew what Shrike was planning to do,